Today we are putting in a traditional tongue and groove style floor, and there are a couple different ways you can do that. You can either glue it down or you can use one of these tools. This is a floor stapler. You can either use a traditional staple like this, or you can use what we're using today, which is a flooring cleat. The flooring cleats will just slide into your machine like so. Now you will take this device and you will slide it right up on top of your tongue and groove floor. On the tongue side, it will rest right here, and you will then whack this with a mallet, which will drive your staple or your nail right at an angle through your floor. Depending on the thickness of your floor, you will change out this plate. When I bought this, it came with a couple of different plates. And since this floor is a 5/8 inch thick floor, I am using the 5/8 to 1/2 inch flooring spacer plate. So in order to kind of see this in action, you'll need a couple things. Obviously an air compressor, which we have this all set up, and a mallet in order to fire this machine. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take your board and you're gonna kind of get it started, and these mallets are really nice because they're angled off to this side. When you do whack this board, it's a little bit easier to make a flat contact with it instead of like a traditional hammer or something like that. Be careful not to damage the tongue. You can use a sacrificial board in order to knock it in place if you really got to muscle it in. And basically get it nice and tight. You take your machine and you slide it up like that. I like to kind of step on it and make sure that it's level and flush, and then you just hit it with a hammer, and it will drive your fastener in through the tongue and also scoot your board back, making everything really tight and solid. When you're first starting to lay a hardwood floor, especially if it's a tongue and groove, but probably for any type of floor, you definitely need a straight line as your starting piece, because everything is going to be based off of your first row. Since this is an old house, this wall is absolutely crazy. It is like, a wiggly worm. So in order to get a straight ledger line for my first row, I used a laser level. I basically just shot a line from this wall, this back wall, to this wall, about 3 inches away from this wall at one point, which is about the width of my board. Then I started to line up my first row, and wherever the wall got close, I basically would just scribe a line to make that board a little bit skinnier. Essentially, you can't use the floor stapler this close to the wall, and you don't want it kicking your first row out of whack. So what I ended up doing was I took a brad nailer and just went down this whole first line down the back, like plenty of times. You shoot plenty of brads in there because they're not that strong, but down the back, you could probably use screws. All of that's going to be covered by trim and cabinets, so it's not a huge deal if it's not super pretty. But basically just face nail it, face screw it. Make sure that it's straight though. That's the most important thing, because if it's not straight, the rest of your floor is going to have gaps and be all sorts of crazy. Vitally important that your first row is dead straight. Another issue you might run into is your room's not going to be square. which means this wall is not going to be perfectly parallel with the opposite wall. So it's really important to measure from multiple points and get a distance off all these walls that's going to work the best. So if it's out, an inch, you're just going to try and split that as well as you can. So say if your near measurement is an inch shorter than your far measurement, probably not a whole lot to be upset about if your room's super wide, but if it's a smaller room, then you'll just kind of split it by a half inch. So your first row is going to be maybe scooched back a half inch, which means you might have to cut half your boards back. Your starting row about a half inch more narrow, and then your finishing row will be about a half inch more narrow, instead of just your finish row being out by a significant degree. You're just going to want to try and split that difference. We're laying this floor, we just finished a row, and our wall here is at an angle, so it's not just a straight measure and cut. But this method does work with a straight measure and cut as well. This is kind of a tricky cut because this wall is angled. You could go about it a couple of different ways, but I will show you the easiest way. Basically, you take your board, and this is how it would be going in place right here. You want to make sure that this side remains uncut. You don't want to chop this off and then they'll have to scrap this board out. So basically the trick is you take this board and you flip it this way. Then you lay it down, so you got the back of the board facing you. This is the end you're going to cut off, and you make your mark. I usually give it about 1/8 of an inch space right here, so just the width of this tongue. Make my mark. So this is the waist piece right here. We're definitely not going to use that. My angle is going to be cut this way, and my board is flipped upside down, and I'm basically just going to mirror the angle. So this angle goes from my left to my right. So I'm going to start on my right, and I'm going to go down to my left. So I know that this will be the cut because the board is upside down. And I already know that this degree is somewhere close to 30 degrees on my miter saw, so I'm just going to go ahead and mark this off with a square and then do a 30-degree cut from there to there, and I believe that should be a perfect fit. Oops. There we go. All right, and always remember, tap it in lightly. If you have to really whack at it, just use a piece of cut off board, and that will kind of protect the tongue, so you can really kind of wail on it. Otherwise, just tap it really softly and don't damage the tongue. And yeah, you can see that was a perfect cut. Super easy. I didn't have to use a tape measure once. So if you're curious about what size nails or brad nails or staples you're going to use for a floor like this, it kind of depends on how your subfloor looks. You're going to probably pick between a 1.5 inch to a 2 inch nail cleat staple size. We opted for the 2 inch because we're dealing with a bunch of varied material subfloor. We've got some old floors in this room, we've got new floors in this room. We just want to make sure that all of these get down into nice solid wood and bite and hold on, so we're using the bigger ones. But if you've got a brand new house, a brand new subfloor, you could probably opt for a 1.5 inch or something a bit smaller. So it's about halfway through this flooring project. You can see we're approaching the wall, which will determine whether or not we did a good job setting up our ledger row. Or what I would advise you to do is, throughout the project, go ahead and measure and make sure that your floor is tracking true and parallel to the wall that you will eventually meet up on. That's what we're doing now. I'm measuring it here. I think it's pretty square. Looks like it is 73 1/8 maybe to the top of the tongue. And this is probably the next longest point on this wall. Set it up and see where we're at, and look at that. That is, maybe a 1/16 of an inch off, but I would say that is as good as anyone could hope for. That's just to kind of give you an idea. If it was, say, off by an inch or two or something that was going to be pretty noticeable, then you can start either thinking about the drastic measures that you're gonna have to take or start taking them. If it was off by a couple inches, maybe some things that you could do to hide that would be transition strips at the door. If you have the tools, you really could do a whole row where you shaved off maybe at an angle, 1/4 or 1/8 inch, and then recut the groove. And that would kind of help you kind of correct or straighten out your difference that you're experiencing. But that would require a lot of work and the right tools, which you would probably need either a router and a router table, a table saw, and a dado blade. That would be more of a headache, so moral of the story is measure twice and make sure that you're gonna end up all right. So we're laying a floor and we're coming into a new room, as you can see, and we had to stop right here because as you see here, we've got a closet. I don't want to start at the end of this closet and hope or spend a whole lot of time measuring so that it hopefully line up with my flooring here. What I like to do is I'll shoot a laser line straight across and bring a board in front of the closet and continue my run. Because my floor nailer has to go through the tongue of this board. If I'm hitting the boards in this way, I'm not going to have anything to nail into right here because the groove. So basically I need to figure out a way to flip this board around and make my tongue facing the opposite way. And a real easy way to do that is to essentially cut yourself some like tongue shims. This is just a piece of 1/8 inch plywood that I cut down roughly to size. You can buy strips that are gonna work exactly with your wood. Usually the flooring people will sell those as well, but this is just scrap wood we had laying around and it will work just the same. And what you're gonna wanna do is put a little bit of glue on it and then slide it into your board like I've done here and then just tap them into place. And those will act as a makeshift tongue so that when we change the direction of our board to go into this closet this way, this seam right here won't buckle and we won't have to face nail it or anything like that. I've got that set up, I've got those in place. Now I'm going to try and get this board in. But another trick that I like to do is if I start nailing it this way, I might knock this line out of square. So I've just got an old cut off piece of wood here and I'm just gonna drill it into place so that even my hammer is not gonna change this straight line that I have with the rest of my floor. So looks like there's something under there, but it's all set up now, headed into the closet, so I can just grab my board and continue this direction. You'll also have the tongue on this side facing this direction so that I can continue the room coming this way.
Hope this video helps. If you got anything out of it, subscribe, like, and we'll see you in the next video.